Good morning. Good Tuesday morning. I'm going to do a little flapping video here, and those sometimes are very long. I try not to, but I just want to make a couple little points here. I enjoy working in the shop. I had one of my viewers say, I should get out and do some things. Well, I do. I go to yard sales and flea markets. I enjoy that. I go out for coffee every morning, and I sit with the old guys 6 days a week. And, I think I do more than just sit in this shop here. This, I'm very pleased with. The WV98C RCA Senior Voltomist. I'll show you a close-up of it in a little while. I got the case done. I didn't paint the screws, so they're rusty. Put a new cord on it, sanded and painted the case, and hand painted the edges because I didn't want to spray it. No matter how much I mask it off, it's going to get on the meter. It's happened before, on other things. You mask and still get the paint manages to get in there and mess things up. So I've got the handle on with no problem, but for some reason I see a lock washer on the floor, so obviously one of the lock washers that go under the handle here must have dropped out, and I didn't see it. But I didn't have a problem getting the C-clips back in. One of my viewers had a very good suggestion. Take a magnet, which is this is a very strong magnet that came out of that signal core meter, and just lay the magnet near where I'm working, so if that clip flies off, it'll go right to the magnet. It did not fly off, but it was there in case it did. So that was a very good suggestion. Thank you very much for that idea. Being that that case is aluminum, of course the magnet didn't stick to that, so I just laid it near there and snapped it on. But I may have to go in there and take the handle off and put this lock washer in there. I'm not going to worry about the needle. It's a matter of balance. It's right on zero now. So if you set the adjustment, which you can't do on this, it's plugged off. A closer examination on this, it appears to be all plastic all the way through. In other words, there's no hole in there to adjust it. That's okay. And one of my viewers, I believe it was Don Mangold, said, there's a fork in there. Yes, I know that. And on the ICO 232, you had an adjustment and a little offset set screw, which had it moved the fork like this, and that would center it. The problem is, if you center this, if you could zero this for the zero mark here, it would be off this way. So in other words, it's a balance problem. You have to have the eyes of a jeweler, you have to have the hands of a jeweler, and the patience of a jeweler. In other words, a watchmaker, in order to work on this. I will not do that. You see the troubles I have trying to do stuff like this and doing good solder joints, let alone doing this. If I got in there and worked on that meter, this would be junk right now. Not going to worry about it. I'll compensate it right here. Now, I think there are some resistors that are off on here. I ran some more tests on this. When I set to 50 volts using my ICO 950B and my digital meter, got it exactly to 50 volts. it was a little over that on this. Now I had adjusted all this before. I had set it to 18 volts using my power supply. I could have used the other one that's up here, and that's working very well, the one I got at a yard sale. I ran that through its paces yesterday. She's right on. Perfect. But at the time I was calibrating this, I was only using this. Either way, I had a digital meter on the output. On those ranges, I adjusted, because I didn't bother turning on the ICO 950 to get the 50 volt range. I used the 50 volt scale on the 18 volt range, and this goes up to 18.5 volts. Later on, I ran this off camera. I don't know, let me look and see if you can see that. As you can see, I got the power supply right up here. These are the leads that came with it, which is thin, but they're perfect for this. So this goes up to 30 volts. It'll actually go to 31 if you take the fine control and turn it all the way up. So what happens is, on this meter here, when I get to the 50 volt, it's off just a little bit. It's not too bad in the mid-range. It's off a little bit, but very, very little. And when I took my ICO, which I did off camera about an hour ago, and I ran all the way up to the 1500 range, and the max that this ICO 950 will put out is 444 volts. And it was off on the 1500 or the 500 range, I don't remember which, but very little. It's only a matter of a few volts. The telemic, which goes over 600 volts, my digital meter was reading 600 volts, and as I recall, setting this on the 1500, I don't have the exact figures in my head, it was reading high. There's a variation, and I think some resistors may be off, but I'm not going to worry about it. I ran some more tests with the ohm scale, and the resistance is almost perfect, and the AC, of course, is good. So the voltages are off a little bit. Like if I'm doing 25 volts, it might be a half to a volt off. I'm not going to worry about a volt. I mean, some guys, yes, they're picky, or they want it right on. I do too, but there's some resistors probably off in that. And then with my eyesight, looking right at the meter, you know, my eyes are off. So, you know, so I'm not going to worry about, and I'm not going to nitpick on that. What the heck? Where did these screws come from? Isn't that something? I take apart something. Oh, yes, okay. I know what they are. Those are the new screws for this. The two that go in here, two on the other side, and two underneath. Okay. This has been working good. So I think I'm going to just put that back in the case. I don't know why it's not making any static, but it's been working very well. No changes. One of my viewers, Leo from South Carolina, yesterday I received a package, and he said he was going to send me some antenna wire and insulators. I didn't ask for it, but he wanted to pay me for the stuff that I sent him, the satellite stuff that I got at the yard sale, and I didn't want any money for it. But he says, I'm going to send you some wire, so he did. 50 feet. He sent me two 50-foot hanks of wire, hard, solid wire. I think it's like number 14, insulated. One is white and one is black. I think I'll put the black up. The white will stand out like a sore thumb, and I don't want anything to be noticeable. Not a problem. I don't have any problem with the park owner, but you know, I like to have things where it's not too noticeable, you know. So I'm going to run, I think they're both 50 feet. I can show them on the video after here. But anyways, I'm going to give you a close-up of this. Hang on a minute. Now the panel I can't do any more with. It's got rust on it, and I cleaned it with cleaner, and of course I took all the knobs off. And then what I did is I put a little bit of thin oil and covered the whole thing and rubbed it all in. And that's all you can do with this. If you try scrubbing this or you know, using steel wool on it, you're going to take all this writing off. So it's not nice and shiny like I've seen other YouTube videos of this same meter. Cosmetically, those meters look like in mint condition. But the meter face and the plexiglass is very, very clean. You know, this rust here is the same situation I dealt with on this. On the Sprague TO5 Telemic, as you've seen in the video when I was restoring this, if you did watch it, if you didn't, it's in there. It's gotta go back a ways. This is all rust in here, and I had to mask this off in order to paint it without painting over the writing. So this is all rust. So what I did is I put a very light film of very thin grease on everything exposed here. And so, in other words, there's a little slight greasy feel to keep it from rusting out. In case you get condensation or something on it, it's not going to get any worse. Ideally, I would have painted all this, but then I would have had to write by hand all this information, and it would have looked like a Mickey Mouse thing. As it is now, it's a Mickey Mouse job I did, but you got to think that this thing was a wreck when I got it off of eBay. So when you get a meter that's a wreck, like this one was, I am really surprised that it came out as good as it did. Of course, I had to sand and paint the back, and of course that label, which was pretty crappy anyways, was half worn off, literally fell off and disintegrated. So I think for $2, you know, the best VTVM I got is the ICO 235 that I got from Don Mangold, and I do use that here and there, but I find myself using my digital meter mostly, and I'll be using this from time to time too. And when I need a meter that is not 11 megohms input impedance, of course, I'll use the Simpson 260 out there in the back. Of course, you're hearing the air conditioner going because it's still too damn hot, but we're getting a cool down, a chill coming up, and I love that. I love the sound of that. So I'm doing so good with the flea market up in Jewett City. I'm going back there again Sunday. They only have it on Sunday. I don't always get a good deal every time I go up there, but maybe some of you, I know one of the viewers, I think it was Fino, that mentioned, you know, I should go out and do something. Well, I do. You know, I'm not a person that goes like sports. I couldn't care less. I don't like the heat and the humidity. I'm not a beach guy. I never was, even when I was a kid. I could never see the point of burning yourself up on the beach. When I was younger, I always wanted to stay in the cellar and have my workshop. When I lived in New Haven in 1959, I had a kind of a damp but not wet cellar, and it was much cooler down there. While it was 95 and 100 outside, I was comfortable down there in a 4-family tenement house that we lived in, as I mentioned so many times before in my flapping videos. It gives me great satisfaction to bring something like this, which the average person would trash and maybe pull the knobs off and throw the rest out. Same with that tube tester, that night tube tester. When I first saw that, I said, do I need this thing in my shop? Well, you know what? I paid $4 for that. And that was the best $4 I've ever invested in a long time. This was the best $2 I've ever invested in a long time. And that B&K 1610, is it? $10. I would have to be nuts up here to pass it up. Maybe some of you guys out there think I am nuts for buying all this stuff. And yes, the shop is getting crowded, but if I'm not going to pass up a good piece of equipment. Worst case scenario, I'll store it. But if I can use it, I'll take something else out of here. I got stuff over here in storage. Like, I got 2 computers here. One is a Windows 98 desktop, and one is an old Windows XP that my wife had way back. They both work. They're taking up shelf space over here. I've got I got too many screwdrivers, pliers, and screw-holding screwdrivers and stuff like that I got off of eBay and yard sales and everything else. The drawer is really overfull. I got way too much stuff in here. But right now, it's not bad because I took out all my hemostats and hung them up over here, but I don't have room to hang all the screwdrivers. I don't have any wall space here to hang the screwdrivers. So I have to condense some of this stuff. Because right now it's not a problem after I took out the hemostats. And I should only keep a limited amount of stuff in the drawer. And like a 3/16 here, how often would I use that? This came from this is an Exolite. Like this came from my old shop. So. Let me show you the antenna wire. Not that you haven't seen antenna wire before. That Leo sent me. Before I hook that up, I still have to get a lightning arrestor, and I'm not sure what kind would be the best. And I'm going to run some coax. It don't matter whether it's 50 ohm or 75 ohm. You're not transmitting with it. Like I said, Mike, my buddy Mike, that calibrated this scope for me last year, says the losses at just shortwave listening isn't going to amount to anything. Whether you use 50 ohm or 75 ohm, I have a lot of 75 ohm coax. It's just got to dig it out. It's not in here. And I'm just going to run coaxial from the back of this radio. Ground shield will go on the back of the radio, and the center conductor will go on the antenna terminal. The coax will run up, and when I get outside the building, then I'll run the long wire off of that, and the ground will go down in the ground. We have a lot of rocks here, so you really can't bang anything in the ground more than a foot and a half at the very most. Forget about driving a 6-foot or an 8-foot ground stake. You cannot in this area. We're in rock country. We're in Connecticut, rock country. You're not like some states where you can really drive a stake deep in the ground. So you're only going to go down a foot and a half at the very most, unless you drive the ground stake horizontally or bury a ground wire horizontally in the ground and dig a trench and do it that way. So there isn't very much grounding action. The only way I'd really be able to get a ground is off the outlet cover, which is grounded at the service panel 75 or 100 feet away from here, because going underground with the wire and everything, and by the time we get to the service panel, it's about 75 feet. So that's what I've been doing. I've just been taking the ground wire off of the, clipped onto the outlet box and clipping it to the ground screw on the Hallicrafter's S86. It does help. When I get outside, I'll take the braid of the coax, run a 14 wire or whatever, straight down and into whatever ground stake I can use. Alright, let me take you outside. I'm sure you are bored to hell with this electronic video, but I just want to make a point. I enjoy working on this stuff. I always did. And this is my man cave. This is what I enjoy doing. But when the weather's hot, I'm in here more. When I go buying something at a flea market or a yard sale that's electronic, I want to restore it. It gives me a great sense of satisfaction bringing something that would have been thrown out, that I only paid $2 for, in working condition, back to life. Even though it is not perfect. It's like that Navy oscilloscope. That works pretty good. I got the knobs in from Fair Radio Sales several days ago, and I put them on. The scope is sitting up on the top shelf here. It works. It's not perfect, but it works. So it gives me a great sense of satisfaction restoring things, especially when I get a good deal on them. Alright, enough of this. Let's take you outside and I'll show you the antenna wire and show you an old ground stake that I had way back when I had my 2-meter ham radio antenna set up, when we had our old mobile home back in 1990.
Right, here is a ground stake that was laying almost buried under the ground, been laying on the ground for years, that I had driven in the ground for my 2-meter ham antenna back in 1990. And as you can see, it's bent because it was bent more than that, and I tried to straighten it out. It's steel, it's not copper. You can't drive anything, you can't drive this in the ground beyond a few inches. So what happens is it's bent because it goes horizontally to get around the rocks. And a lot of times I can only go in about halfway. So this is like a 3 or 4 foot ground rod, at least wise it was. I need to ask the advice of some of you ham operators out there, because I never was really into... I'm a tinkerer, and I don't know a lot about this stuff. I mean, I had a ARRL handbook, and you can get a lot of information out of that. And you know, because of my eyesight, I try to stay away from too much reading because it's too difficult for me. What happens to the efficiency of a ground when the rod is all rusty like this? When you take a ground rod and drive it in the ground, and it's nice and shiny, this had a copper coating on it and everything, but it's going to get rusty unless you have a solid copper rod, and you never, first of all, it'd be too expensive, Copper's expensive. Second of all, you could never bang it in. I mean, this is a steel rod, and it'll bend going in because there's too many rocks. There's rocks all over. And that's just what you see on the top. I didn't throw those there. Those were there. So you can't go in only a few inches, maybe a half a foot or a foot if you're real lucky. So what happens to this efficiency? Is this rod, if I ground this off and I was able to drive this in the ground, would this be as efficient of a ground, being that it's all rusty like this? Even if I cleaned this off and ground this down to bare metal and put a new clamp on here and use this rod, would this rod be effective with all that rust on it? That's a good question. That's a good question. Okay, Leo sent me these, and the way it looks, he used the white wire. Now the black, I'm not sure how many feet that is, but the most run I can make without interruption is 35 feet, as I showed on the other video. But if I put the white up there, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. I think I'll run the black. It's the same gauge. It appears to be like 14. Solid wire, very stiff, which I guess is all right. You know, when it blows around, you know how it is with solid wire, it could break, but maybe not. You know, I mean, I guess the hams use solid wire or whatever you can get. I always thought you use a stranded wire. But anyways, he gave me this and two insulators already on it, but it looks to me like this part was the antenna, and judging from this roll and this, it appears this might be a hair longer, but I'm not sure. I could unwind this and see, but I think I'd rather use the black rather than the white, so it isn't as noticeable. I'd rather keep it not too noticeable. I don't know what these white caterpillars are, but I'm seeing a lot of these white ones, and I don't kill them. I know they're not gypsy moth, so I don't bother with them. The caterpillars, the gypsy moths are gone, but they were very bad this year. But I see a lot of these white ones here. Well, anyways, my last video I wasn't in camera view, but that's nothing new. I'm going to come out with the coax, and I may go right up the side of the tree and go up to that branch coming off there. That'll be my holding point. That's about 5 or 6 feet. If I stand on this roof here, I think I can reach that. I'm not sure. And put the coax will end at that point. You can see that better here. I might not be able to reach that big branch. These two little saplings coming out is probably where I'm going to have to be. But I might be able to sling something over to that branch. But then I need to come down with the coax on this side of the tree and then go directly over to the roof. Because if I have it in the way, when I get my ladder up here, and I do have to go up on the roof and set my ladder here and clean the roof off every once in a while and stuff like that, and maintain the roof. There's no leaks, but I always go up there and check, especially in the valley between the shop and the main shed. So I can't have the coax coming out here. So the coax will have to come down out of the shop somewhere where it's convenient, go down like this and go down and underneath here and over, and then shoot straight out to the tree over here.